Captain Alexandra Reeves had served her country with distinction for 15 years when a single moment of alleged cowardice destroyed everything she had built, only for her to return years later as the military's last hope against an enemy no one else could defeat. This is the story of how a disgraced soldier became a hero. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mountain air was crisp and thin at Fort Meridian as Captain Alexandra, Alex, Reeves completed her morning 5-mile run through the Colorado wilderness. At 0530 hours, the base was still wrapped in pre-dawn darkness, but Alex had been running this same route for 3 years. Every peak, every valley, every treacherous switchback was mapped in her muscle memory. Her breathing remained steady despite the 7,000-foot elevation, a testament to the conditioning that had made her one of the most respected officers in the 10th Mountain Division. Alex slowed to a cool-down walk as she approached the main gate, checking her watch with the precision that had defined her military career. 15 years of service had taught her that success lived in the details, the perfect timing, the flawless execution, the unwavering dedication that had earned her 3 commendations for valor and the absolute trust of every soldier under her command. Fort Meridian was coming alive around her as she entered the base proper. Junior officers moved with purpose toward morning formations, their boots clicking in perfect rhythm on the concrete pathways. The distant sound of reveille echoed across the parade grounds, and Alex felt the familiar surge of pride that came with being part of something larger than herself. She had found her calling in the Army 15 years ago, fresh out of West Point, with dreams of making a difference in the world. Her quarters reflected the discipline that had shaped her life. Every item had its designated place, from her pressed uniforms hanging in perfect alignment to her collection of military manuals organized by regulation number. The walls displayed her service record in photographs and commendations, images from deployments in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, where she had led mountain warfare training operations and combat missions that had saved countless American lives. One photograph held special significance: Alex standing with her 1st Command, Bravo Company, after a successful rescue operation in the Hindu Kush Mountains of Afghanistan. She had been a young lieutenant then, barely 25, but had led her team through a blizzard to extract a downed pilot from behind enemy lines. The mission had earned her the Bronze Star and established her reputation as an officer who never left anyone behind. After a quick shower, Alex dressed with the same meticulous attention to detail that characterized everything she did. Each ribbon and badge on her uniform told a story of courage, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to the soldiers she led. Her specialty was mountain warfare and cold weather operations, skills that had made her invaluable in some of the military's most challenging environments. As she adjusted her captain's bars one final time, Alex reflected on how far she had come. The daughter of immigrant parents who had arrived in America with nothing but hope and determination, she had built a career based on merit, dedication, and an unshakable belief in the principles she had sworn to defend. Her parents had watched with pride as she graduated from West Point, and they continued to beam with pride every time they saw her in uniform. The operations center at Fort Meridian buzzed with its usual morning activity as Alex entered the secure facility. Her role as operations officer for the 10th Mountain Division meant she was responsible for planning and coordinating training exercises that prepared soldiers for some of the world's most dangerous environments. The mountains of Colorado provided the perfect training ground for operations in Afghanistan, where American forces still maintained a presence in the most treacherous terrain on Earth. "Morning, Captain," called Sergeant First Class Monica Wells, her senior NCO and right hand for the past 2 years. "Colonel Hawthorne wants to see you in his office at 0700. Something about a priority mission briefing." Alex felt a familiar flutter of anticipation. Priority missions usually meant deployment, and deployment meant the chance to put her skills to use in service of her country. She had volunteered for every deployment opportunity that had come her way, earning a reputation as an officer who actively sought the most challenging assignments. "Any idea what it's about?" Alex asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee from the perpetually brewing pot that kept the operations center running. "Above my pay grade, ma'am," Wells replied with a grin. "But I saw some serious-looking folks from the Pentagon arrive yesterday evening. Whatever it is, it's big." Alex spent the next 20 minutes reviewing overnight intelligence reports and checking on the status of various training operations under her supervision. The 10th Mountain Division was preparing for a major winter warfare exercise, and every detail had to be perfect. The mountains didn't forgive mistakes, and neither did the enemy's American soldiers faced in places like Afghanistan's remote peaks. At exactly 0700 hours, Alex knocked on Colonel Richard Hawthorne's office door. Hawthorne had been her commanding officer for 3 years, and she had developed tremendous respect for his leadership style and tactical expertise. He was a soldier's soldier, someone who had earned his rank through competence rather than politics. "Enter," came Hawthorne's voice from inside. Alex stepped into the office to find Colonel Hawthorne seated behind his desk alongside 2 civilians in expensive suits and a general she didn't recognize. The atmosphere in the room was tense, formal, in a way that suggested this wasn't a routine briefing. "Captain Reeves," Colonel Hawthorne said, without his usual warmth. "At ease. I'd like you to meet General Patricia Donovan from the Pentagon and these gentlemen from the Department of Defense." Alex assumed the position, noting the unusual formality in Hawthorne's voice. Something was wrong, she could feel it in the way. The civilians avoided eye contact and in the tension that seemed to fill the room like a physical presence. "Captain," General Donovan spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "We need to discuss Operation Mountain Storm." The words hit Alex like a physical blow. Operation Mountain Storm had been a classified mission 18 months ago, one that had ended in tragedy and questions that had never been fully answered. It wasn't something that got discussed in routine briefings, and the fact that Pentagon officials were here asking about it suggested that the past was about to collide with her present in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Alex kept her expression neutral, but her mind raced through the implications. Operation Mountain Storm had been a rescue mission in Afghanistan's most dangerous territory, a mission that had tested every skill she had developed over 15 years of service. It had also been a mission that had ended with accusations, investigations, and shadows that had followed her ever since. "Yes, ma'am," Alex replied carefully. "What specifically would you like to know?" General Donovan opened a manila folder and spread several photographs across Colonel Hawthorne's desk. Alex recognized them immediately: satellite images of the Spingar mountain range in Afghanistan, where Operation Mountain Storm had taken place 18 months earlier. The images showed a remote valley surrounded by peaks that reached over 13,000 feet, terrain so treacherous that even experienced mountain warfare specialists considered it nearly impassable. "Refresh my memory, Captain," General Donovan said, her tone suggesting this was anything but a memory exercise. "What was your role in Operation Mountain Storm?" Alex chose her words carefully. Operation Mountain Storm had been classified at the highest levels, and even now, she wasn't certain what these officials knew or what they were looking for. "I was the senior mountain warfare specialist assigned to the rescue team. Our mission was to extract a downed Special Forces unit that had been conducting reconnaissance in Taliban-controlled territory." One of the civilians, a thin man with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "And what went wrong, Captain?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Alex felt the familiar weight of that day settling on her shoulders, the impossible choices, the split-second decisions, and the aftermath that had haunted her ever since. Operation Mountain Storm had been designed as a textbook mountain rescue operation, but nothing about it had gone according to the textbook. Intelligence reports indicated that the downed unit was located in a valley, approximately 8 miles from our insertion point. Alex began, her voice steady despite the emotions the memories triggered. Weather conditions were deteriorating rapidly, with a major storm system moving in that would make extraction impossible for several days. She paused, remembering the weight of her equipment as they had fast roped from helicopters onto a narrow ridge at 11,000 feet. The rescue team had consisted of 12 elite soldiers, each one trained in high-altitude warfare and equipped with the best technology the military could provide. Alex had been confident they could reach the downed unit and extract them before the storm hit. The initial phase of the operation proceeded as planned, Alex continued. We established our position and began the descent toward the target coordinates. However, approximately 4 hours into the mission, we encountered unexpected resistance. What she didn't say was that unexpected resistance was a massive understatement. The Taliban forces waiting for them had been prepared, equipped with heavy weapons, and positioned in defensive positions that suggested they had known the rescue mission was coming. Someone had leaked the operational details, turning a rescue mission into an ambush. General Donovan consulted her notes. According to the after-action report, you made the decision to abort the mission and order your team to withdraw. Is that correct? Alex felt her jaw tighten. The after-action report had been written by people who hadn't been there, who hadn't seen the overwhelming enemy forces or faced the impossible choice between certain death and tactical withdrawal. The enemy forces significantly outnumbered our unit, and they had positioned themselves in a way that made approach to the target location tactically impossible without sustaining massive casualties. But you were ordered to complete the mission regardless of opposition, the thin civilian sighed, his voice carrying an accusatory edge. The downed unit was depending on you. The accusation hit Alex like a physical blow. She had replayed that moment 1,000 times, analyzing every possible alternative and coming to the same conclusion each time. The Taliban had turned the rescue attempt into a trap, and walking into that trap would have meant the deaths of her entire team without saving the soldiers they had come to rescue. Sir, with respect, the tactical situation on the ground was significantly different from what intelligence had predicted, Alex replied, struggling to keep her voice professional. Enemy forces had established interlocking fields of fire that would have made any approach suicide. I made the decision to withdraw and request air support to neutralize the enemy positions before attempting the rescue. Colonel Hawthorne spoke. For the first time since the meeting had begun, Captain Reeves called for immediate air support and artillery strikes on the enemy positions. Her plan was to suppress the enemy forces and then complete the rescue mission. General Donovan's expression remained cold. But the air support was delayed due to weather conditions, and by the time it arrived, it was too late. Alex closed her eyes briefly, remembering the radio chatter as they had waited on the ridge for the promised air support. The storm had moved in faster than predicted, grounding the attack helicopters and making artillery support impossible due to cloud cover. For 6 hours, her team had maintained their position while the enemy forces below them consolidated their defensive positions. When the air support finally arrived, the enemy had moved the captured soldiers to a different location, Alex said quietly. By then, the storm had made further operations impossible. What followed had been 3 days of the worst weather Alex had ever experienced in the mountains. Hurricane-force winds, temperatures that dropped below -20 degrees, and snow that fell so heavily that visibility was reduced to less than 10 feet. Her team had been forced to dig snow caves and wait for the storm to pass, knowing that every hour that passed reduced the chances that the captured soldiers were still alive. The downed unit was never recovered, General Donovan stated flatly. 4 American soldiers died in Taliban custody, because you chose to withdraw rather than complete your mission." The words were like knife wounds, each one precise and devastating. Alex had known this moment would come eventually, the moment when someone would hold her accountable for a decision that had been impossible to make correctly. Either choice would have resulted in American deaths, but she had chosen the option that saved her team rather than sacrificing them in a futile gesture. "General, the tactical situation made a successful rescue impossible," Alex replied, her voice growing stronger. "Proceeding with the mission as originally planned would have resulted in the deaths of my entire team without saving the captured soldiers. I made the decision that preserved the maximum number of American lives possible under the circumstances." The thin civilian opened another folder. "The families of those 4 soldiers don't see it that way, Captain. They see an officer who abandoned their sons and husbands when they needed her most." Alex felt something break inside her chest. She had carried the weight of those 4 deaths for 18 months, wondering if there had been another way, if she had missed some tactical option that could have saved them. The accusation of abandonment was the one thing she couldn't defend against, because part of her wondered if it was true. "The review board will determine whether your actions constituted cowardice in the face of the enemy," General Donovan announced, standing up from her chair. "You are hereby relieved of duty pending the completion of a formal investigation." The room fell silent except for the sound of Alex's heart hammering in her chest. Cowardice, the word that destroyed military careers and reputations. The accusation that meant everything she had worked for over 15 years was about to disappear. 3 weeks later, Captain Alexandra Reeves sat in the sterile conference room at Fort Meridian, facing a panel of 5 officers who would determine her fate. The formal hearing had been arranged with military precision, a long table separating her from her judges, American flags positioned at precise angles, and recording equipment that would capture every word for posterity. This was where 15 years of exemplary service would either be vindicated or destroyed forever. The presiding officer, Brigadier General Thomas Mitchell, called the hearing to order at exactly 0900 hours. Alex had researched every member of the panel during her 3 weeks of suspended duty, learning their service records and trying to predict how they might view her case. None of them had extensive mountain warfare experience, which meant they would be judging decisions made in terrain and conditions they had never personally encountered. "This hearing will determine whether Captain Alexandra Reeves acted with cowardice in the face of the enemy during Operation Mountain Storm," General Mitchell announced in a voice that carried the weight of military justice. "The accused is charged with failure to complete assigned mission parameters, abandoning fellow service members in combat, and conduct unbecoming an officer." Alex felt each word like a physical blow. The charges painted a picture of a soldier who had failed in the most fundamental way possible, abandoning her fellow Americans when they needed her most. The fact that her tactical decision had saved the lives of 12 soldiers meant nothing compared to the 4 lives that had been lost. Her military-appointed defense attorney, Major Kevin Stone, had spent the past 3 weeks preparing arguments about impossible tactical situations and the principles of military leadership that sometimes required preserving forces for future operations. But Alex could see in his eyes that he believed they were fighting an uphill battle against political pressure and public opinion. The prosecution began with satellite imagery and radio transcripts from Operation Mountain Storm. They painted a picture of a mission that had required courage and determination, not the careful calculation that Alex had employed. The lead prosecutor, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Adams, had a reputation for aggressive tactics and an absolute belief in military discipline above all else. "Ladies and gentlemen of the panel," Colonel Adams began, "you will hear evidence that Captain Reeves had clear orders to extract American soldiers from enemy territory regardless of opposition. When faced with that opposition, she chose personal safety over mission completion, abandoning 4 American heroes to die in enemy custody. The words stung because they contained just enough truth to be devastating. Alex had chosen to preserve her team rather than sacrifice them in what she believed was a futile assault. That choice had kept 12 soldiers alive, but it had also sealed the fate of the 4 captured Americans. The prosecution's first witness was Lieutenant Benjamin Cross, the intelligence officer who had briefed Alex's team before Operation Mountain Storm. Cross testified that the intelligence reports had indicated moderate enemy presence in the target area, not the overwhelming force that Alex claimed to have encountered. The intelligence assessment showed scattered Taliban forces with light weapons, Cross testified under oath. Nothing that should have prevented a trained mountain warfare team from completing their mission. Alex watched Cross testify and realized that the fix was in. The intelligence reports she remembered had clearly indicated heavy enemy activity in the region, but the official versions being presented to the panel showed significantly reduced threat assessments. Someone had sanitized the records to make her withdrawal appear unjustified. Major Stone's cross-examination revealed some inconsistencies in the intelligence timeline, but the damage had been done. The panel now had official testimony that Alex had faced manageable opposition rather than the overwhelming force she claimed. The second day of hearings brought testimony from family members of the 4 soldiers who had died in Taliban custody. Alex sat motionless as grieving parents and widows described their loved ones and demanded to know why no one had tried to save them. Each word of their testimony carved another piece from her soul. My son Michael was 23 years old, testified Mrs. Patricia Williams, the mother of one of the captured soldiers. He believed that American soldiers never left anyone behind. He trusted that if he was ever in trouble, someone like Captain Reeves would risk everything to bring him home. Instead, she chose to save herself. The accusation of self-preservation was particularly cruel because it ignored the 12 soldiers whose lives Alex had saved. But in the emotional math of military justice, the lives she had preserved couldn't balance against the lives she had failed to save. Alex's own testimony came on the 3rd day. She described the tactical situation in detail, explaining how the enemy forces had been positioned in defensive positions that made approach impossible without massive casualties. She talked about the deteriorating weather conditions and the delayed air support that had made the mission parameters impossible to fulfill. I made the decision that would preserve the maximum number of American lives, Alex testified, looking directly at the panel members. Proceeding with the original mission would have resulted in the deaths of my entire team without successfully rescuing the captured soldiers. I chose tactical withdrawal to preserve combat capability for future operations. Colonel Adams's cross-examination was brutal and methodical. She attacked every aspect of Alex's decision-making, questioning her courage, her commitment, and her understanding of military duty. The prosecution painted a picture of an officer who had prioritized personal safety over mission accomplishment, the cardinal sin of military leadership. Captain Reeves, isn't it true that you never actually attempted to assault the enemy positions? Adams asked with prosecutorial precision. The tactical situation made such an assault tactically unsound, Alex replied, maintaining her military Baron, despite the personal attack, that's not what I asked. Did you or did you not attempt to complete your assigned mission? Alex felt trapped by the legal framework that reduced complex tactical decisions to simple yes or no questions. I did not assault the enemy positions because doing so would have resulted in the unnecessary deaths of American soldiers. So your answer is no. You did not attempt to complete your mission. The hearing concluded after 5 days of testimony, evidence, and character assassination. Alex sat in the conference room as the panel deliberated, knowing that her military career hung in the balance. Major Stone had done his best, but the political pressure and emotional weight of the case made the outcome predictable. When the panel returned, General Mitchell's expression told Alex everything she needed to know. before he spoke a single word. Captain Alexandra Reeves, this panel finds you guilty of conduct unbecoming an officer and failure to complete assigned mission parameters. You are hereby sentenced to dishonorable discharge from the United States Army, forfeiture of all benefits and pension rights, and reduction to the rank of private. The words echoed in the sterile conference room like gunshots. 15 years of dedicated service, 3 Bronze Stars, and countless soldiers whose lives she had saved, all of it erased with a single sentence. Alex maintained her military bearing as her career died around her, but inside, something fundamental broke that would never fully heal. As the military police escorted her from the hearing room, Alex caught sight of Colonel Hawthorne in the hallway. Their eyes met for just a moment, and she saw something that looked like regret before he turned away. Even her commanding officer couldn't associate with a disgraced soldier. The formal ceremony of stripping her rank and credentials took place the following morning. In front of assembled troops, Alex stood at attention as they removed her captain's bars, her ribbons, and her badges of service. The symbolism was brutal and deliberate, a public humiliation designed to send a message about the consequences of failure. As Alex walked off Fort Meridian for the last time, carrying her personal belongings in a single duffel bag, she felt the weight of total defeat. She had lost everything: her career, her reputation, her identity, and her future. The mountains of Colorado that had been her training ground for 15 years now looked like monuments to her failure. Behind her, the base continued its daily operations, but Alex knew she would never be part of that world again. She was now a civilian with a dishonorable discharge, unemployable in any field that required security clearance or military experience. The woman who had once been trusted with the lives of soldiers was now considered unfit for any position of responsibility. But as she walked toward an uncertain future, Alex carried with her the absolute certainty that she had made the right tactical decision on that mountain in Afghanistan. Someday, somehow, the truth about Operation Mountain Storm would come to light. She just had to survive long enough to see it happen. 6 months after her dishonorable discharge, Alexandra Reeves sat in another sterile waiting room, this time at a temporary employment agency in downtown Denver. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she filled out yet another application, knowing that the moment they ran her background check, she would receive the same polite rejection she had received dozens of times before. Dishonorable discharge was like a scarlet letter in the civilian world, a mark that branded her as fundamentally unreliable and untrustworthy. The apartment she now called home was a studio in one of Denver's rougher neighborhoods, a far cry from the officer quarters she had occupied at Fort Meridian. The walls were thin enough that she could hear her neighbors' conversations, and the heating system worked sporadically during Colorado's harsh winter months. At night, she lay awake listening to sirens and wondering how her life had collapsed so completely in such a short time. "Ms. Reeves?" called a cheerful voice from across the waiting room. Alex looked up to see a young woman with a clipboard approaching, her smile already beginning to fade as she reviewed Alex's application. This part was always the same initial optimism followed by barely concealed disappointment when they reached the military service section. "I see you have 15 years of military experience," the employment counselor said, settling into the chair across from Alex. "That's impressive. What type of discharge did you receive?" Alex had practiced this moment dozens of times, but it never got easier. "Dishonorable," she replied simply, watching the woman's expression change from professional interest to polite concern. "I see." The counselor's voice took on the careful tone that Alex had learned to recognize, the sound of someone trying to end a conversation without being overtly rude. "Unfortunately, most of our clients require employees who can pass extensive background checks. Have you considered positions that don't require security clearances?" It was a reasonable question that missed the fundamental reality of Alex's situation. In the civilian world, A dishonorable discharge was treated as equivalent to a felony conviction. Employers assumed it meant she had committed serious crimes or displayed character flaws that made her unemployable. The fact that her discharge had resulted from a tactical decision in combat was irrelevant to human resources departments that saw only the official designation. I've applied for positions in construction, retail, food service, and warehouse work, Alex replied, maintaining the professional demeanor that 15 years of military service had ingrained in her. The result is always the same once they complete the background check. The employment counselor shuffled through Alex's paperwork with obvious discomfort. Have you considered explaining the circumstances of your discharge to potential employers? Alex almost laughed at the suggestion. How do you explain Operation Mountain Storm to a retail manager or warehouse supervisor? How do you describe the impossible tactical situation, the competing priorities, and the split-second decision that had saved 12 lives while failing to save 4 others? The complexities of military leadership didn't translate to civilian job interviews. Most employers aren't interested in explanations, Alex said. They see dishonorable discharge and assume I'm a security risk or have serious character problems. After another fruitless meeting, Alex walked the streets of Denver with no particular destination in mind. The city bustled around her with the energy of people who had places to go and purposes to fulfill, while she felt increasingly like a ghost haunting the edges of society. Her savings from 15 years of military service were dwindling rapidly, and she was beginning to face the very real possibility of homelessness. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had served her country in some of the world's most dangerous places, only to find herself unable to secure basic employment in her homeland. She had led soldiers through combat operations, made life-and-death decisions under extreme pressure, and managed complex logistics in hostile environments. But none of those skills seemed to translate to the civilian job market. Her phone rang as she walked past a Veterans Assistance Center, and Alex answered without checking the caller ID, hoping it might be a potential employer. Alex? It's Mom. The voice of her mother, Alexandra Reeves, carried the worried tone that had become increasingly common in their conversations over the past 6 months. Hi, Mom, Alex replied, trying to inject some optimism into her voice. Her parents had been devastated by her discharge, not because they doubted her character, but because they understood how much her military career had meant to her. How did the job interview go today? Alina asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. About the same as the others, Alex admitted. There was no point in lying to her mother, who had watched her struggle with unemployment since her discharge. They're not interested in hiring someone with a dishonorable discharge. Mia, you know your father and I don't believe what they said about you, Alina said firmly. We know you're not a coward. We know you would never abandon soldiers who needed help. The unconditional support from her parents was both comforting and heartbreaking. They had immigrated to America with dreams of building a better life for their children, and Alex had been their success story, the daughter who had graduated from West Point and built a distinguished military career. Now she couldn't even get hired at a grocery store. I know, Mom. It's just hard to find employers who are willing to look past the official record. After ending the call with her mother, Alex found herself standing outside a veterans bar called the Foxhole. Through the windows, she could see former soldiers sharing drinks and war stories, finding community with people who understood their experiences. But Alex knew that even among veterans, her dishonorable discharge would make her an outcast. She pushed through the door anyway, needing the comfort of being around people who spoke her language, even if they might reject her once they learned her story. The bar was dimly lit and decorated with military memorabilia from various conflicts. Conversations buzzed with the familiar cadence of soldiers talking about missions, leadership, and the challenges of transitioning to civilian life. Alex ordered a beer and sat at the end of the bar, listening to the conversations around her while trying to remain invisible. At a nearby table, she heard two former Marines discussing their experiences with VA benefits and job placement programs, resources that were unavailable to her because of her discharge status. "You served?" asked the bartender, a grizzled man in his 50s with visible tattoos indicating Army service. 15 years, Alex replied carefully. 10th Mountain Division. Mountain warfare, huh? That's some serious shit, the bartender said with obvious respect. Afghanistan? Alex nodded, not trusting herself to say more. The bartender seemed genuinely interested in her service, and she didn't want to ruin the moment by revealing her. "Disgrace, buy you a drink?" asked a voice behind her. Alex turned to see a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and the unmistakable bearing of a former officer. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, retired Air Force." They shook hands, and Alex introduced herself using only her first name. Sarah had an easy manner that suggested she was comfortable with command, and their conversation quickly turned to their respective military experiences. "What brings you to Denver?" Sarah asked, and Alex realized she was being asked the question that would either end their conversation or open the door to understanding. "I'm between jobs," Alex said carefully. "Transitioning to civilian life has been more challenging than I expected." Sarah nodded with understanding. "It's tough out there for veterans, especially if you're dealing with any kind of service-connected issues. What's your discharge status?" The moment of truth had arrived. Alex could lie, but she had never been dishonest, and she wasn't going to start now. "Dishonorable," she said quietly, watching Sarah's expression change from warmth to confusion. "Dishonorable?" Sarah's voice carried the same shock that Alex had seen in dozens of other veterans' faces. "What happened?" Alex gave Sarah the condensed version of Operation Mountain Storm, watching her process the information with the analytical mind of a former officer. Unlike civilian employers, Sarah understood the complexities of military decision-making and the impossible situations that combat could create. "That's bullshit," Sarah said finally. "You made a tactical decision to preserve your force. That's basic military leadership, not cowardice." For the first time in months, Alex felt like someone understood the reality of what she had faced. But even Sarah's validation couldn't change the practical reality of her situation. "Understanding and employability are two different things," Alex replied. "Most people see dishonorable discharge and assume I'm a criminal or a coward." As Alex left the foxhole that evening, she felt slightly less alone but no closer to solving her fundamental problems. She was a highly trained soldier with no way to use her skills, a leader with no one to lead, and a patriot branded as a traitor by the very system she had served faithfully for 15 years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 8 months after her discharge, Alex was working the night shift at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Denver, one of the few employers willing to hire someone with her background. The job paid minimum wage and offered no benefits, but it kept her from becoming homeless and gave her something to do during the long hours when sleep eluded her. The work was mind-numbing, taking orders, serving coffee, and cleaning tables. It was honest work that didn't require explaining her past to judgmental strangers. It was during one of these late-night shifts, around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, that Dr. Samantha Reed first walked into her life. Alex noticed her immediately because she was clearly out of place among the usual collection of truck drivers, insomniacs, and night shift workers who frequented the diner. Dr. Reed was a woman in her early 50s with intelligent eyes and the composed bearing of someone accustomed to dealing with classified information. She ordered black coffee and a piece of pie, then sat in a corner booth where she could observe the entire diner while maintaining a clear view of both entrances. Alex recognized the behavior immediately, It was the way intelligence operatives positioned themselves in unfamiliar environments. Old habits from her military days made her automatically catalog Dr. Reed's appearance and behavior, noting details that civilian employees would miss. "Quiet night," Dr. Reed commented when Alex refilled her coffee cup for the third time. "They usually are during the week," Alex replied professionally, though something about the woman's tone suggested this was more than casual conversation. "You're Alexandra Reeves, aren't you?" Dr. Reed asked quietly, and Alex felt every muscle in her body tense with alertness. Alex set down the coffee pot and studied the woman more carefully. "Depends on who's asking and why they want to know." Dr. Reed smiled slightly, as if Alex's caution confirmed something she had suspected. "Someone who believes you got a raw deal 18 months ago. Someone who knows the real story about Operation Mountain Storm." The words hit Alex like an electric shock. Since her discharge, no one had mentioned Operation Mountain Storm except to condemn her actions. The idea that someone might know details beyond the official narrative was both terrifying and intriguing. "I don't know what you're talking about," Alex said carefully, glancing around the nearly empty diner to ensure they weren't being overheard. "Intelligence reports that were sanitized before your hearing," Dr. Reed continued in a voice barely above a whisper. "Radio intercepts that were classified above your defense attorney's clearance level. Satellite imagery that showed things the review board never saw." Alex felt her heart racing as Dr. Reed described information that could only have come from someone with access to the highest levels of military intelligence. This wasn't a reporter fishing for a story or a conspiracy theorist with wild theories. This was someone who had seen the classified materials that had been kept from her own defense team. "Who are you?" Alex asked, abandoning any pretense of not knowing what Dr. Reed was talking about. "I'm someone who worked in intelligence analysis for 23 years before my conscience got the better of my career," Dr. Reed replied. "I analyzed the real intelligence reports from Operation Mountain Storm, and I know you were set up to fail." The accusation hung in the air between them like a live grenade. Alex had suspected that something wasn't right about her hearing. The sanitized intelligence reports, the convenient delays in air support, the way certain evidence had been classified beyond her attorney's reach. But hearing someone else voice those suspicions made them feel real and dangerous. "Set up by who?" Alex asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Dr. Reed glanced around the diner again before responding. "People who needed a scapegoat for a much larger failure. People who were willing to destroy a good officer's career to protect their own interests." Before Alex could respond, Dr. Reed stood up and left money on the table for her coffee and pie. "There's a coffee shop called Mountain Grounds on Colfax Avenue. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. Come alone and be very careful who you trust between now and then." Alex watched through the diner windows as Dr. Reed walked to a nondescript sedan and drove away, leaving her with more questions than answers, and the unsettling feeling that her quiet life of obscurity was about to become very complicated. Rest of her shift passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Alex's mind raced through the implications of Dr. Reed's visit. If there really was evidence that she had been set up, it could mean vindication and the restoration of her career and reputation. But it could also mean danger from people with enough power to destroy a decorated officer and cover their tracks for 18 months. When her shift ended at 6 a.m., Alex drove to her apartment through Denver's empty streets, checking her mirrors for surveillance and taking random turns to ensure she wasn't being followed. The paranoia felt familiar. It was the same vigilance that had kept her alive during multiple combat deployments. But now she was using those skills in her own country, protecting herself from her own government. Back in her studio apartment, Alex tried to sleep but found her mind racing through everything Dr. Reed had said. The possibility that there was evidence of her innocence was intoxicating, but she had learned to be skeptical of hope. Too many promises had been broken, Too many people had let her down for her to trust easily. By noon, Alex had given up on sleep and was pacing her small apartment like a caged animal. She had 13 hours until the meeting at Mountain Grounds, and every minute felt like an hour. She tried to distract herself with routine activities, cleaning, reading, organizing her few possessions, but nothing could quiet her restless mind. At 2:30 p.m., Alex left her apartment and drove toward Colfax Avenue, taking a circuitous route that would allow her to spot any surveillance. She parked 3 blocks from Mountain Grounds and walked the rest of the way, using storefront windows to check for anyone following her. Mountain Grounds was a small independent coffee shop with mismatched furniture and local artwork covering the walls. Alex arrived 15 minutes early and selected a table with clear sightlines to all entrances, falling back on the tactical awareness that had been drilled into her during 15 years of military service. Dr. Reed arrived precisely at 3 p.m., ordered a latte, and sat down across from Alex with the calm efficiency of someone accustomed to clandestine meetings. "You came," Dr. Reed observed with satisfaction. "That takes either courage or desperation." "Probably both," Alex admitted. "Now tell me what you know about Operation Mountain Storm." Dr. Reed opened a leather portfolio and slid a photograph across the table. It showed satellite imagery of the Spingar mountain range, but with much more detail than anything Alex had seen during her hearing. "This image was taken 6 hours before your team inserted," Dr. Reed explained. "It shows clear evidence of a large Taliban force moving into defensive positions around your target area. This intelligence was available to mission planners, but it was never included in your briefing materials." Alex studied the photograph with growing anger. The satellite imagery clearly showed vehicle movements and personnel concentrations that indicated a significant enemy presence, exactly the kind of intelligence that would have changed her tactical approach to the mission. "Why wasn't this included in our briefing?" Alex asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Because someone wanted Operation Mountain Storm to fail," Dr. Reed replied. "The question is why, and that's where things get very dangerous for both of us." As Alex stared at the photographic evidence of the betrayal that had destroyed her career, she realized that Dr. Reed was offering her something more valuable than vindication. She was offering her the truth, no matter how dangerous that truth might be. "What do you want from me?" Alex asked. Dr. Reed's expression grew serious. "I want to help you expose the people who destroyed your career. But first, you need to understand that they're still out there, still in positions of power, and they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens their secrets." Alex felt a familiar surge of determination, the same feeling that had carried her through combat operations and impossible missions. For the first time in 18 months, she had a purpose beyond mere survival. "Tell me what you need me to do." Dr. Reed leaned back in her chair, studying Alex's face with the analytical gaze of someone who had spent decades reading people's motivations and capabilities. "What I'm about to tell you will put your life in danger," she said quietly. "Once you know the truth about Operation Mountain Storm, there's no going back to your quiet life serving coffee and avoiding your past." Alex didn't hesitate. "I stopped having a quiet life the moment they branded me a coward. Tell me everything." Dr. Reed opened her portfolio again and spread several documents across the small coffee shop table. Operation Mountain Storm wasn't just a rescue mission that went wrong. It was deliberately sabotaged by people within our own command structure who needed it to fail. The words sent a chill through Alex's body. She had suspected incompetence or poor planning, but deliberate sabotage suggested a level of betrayal that challenged everything she believed about military loyalty and honor. "Why would anyone want a rescue mission to fail?" Alex asked, though part of her was already beginning to understand the horrifying implications. "Because the 4 soldiers who were captured weren't just any soldiers," Dr. Reed explained, sliding a classified personnel file across the table. They were part of a Special Forces intelligence team that had discovered evidence of weapons trafficking between corrupt Afghan officials and Taliban forces. Evidence that implicated several high-ranking American officers. Alex opened the file and found herself looking at photographs and service records of the 4 men who had died in Taliban custody, men whose deaths she had been blamed for. But these weren't the routine special operations soldiers she had been told about. These were intelligence specialists with top-secret clearances and access to the most sensitive operational information. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, Sergeant First Class James Liu, Corporal Anthony Martinez, and Specialist David Kim, Dr. Reed continued, naming each of the fallen soldiers. They had spent 3 months documenting a network that was selling American weapons to Taliban forces and sharing operational intelligence that was getting our people killed. The revelation hit Alex like a physical blow. The soldiers she had been ordered to rescue hadn't been conducting routine reconnaissance. They had been gathering evidence of treason, and someone had made sure they would never be able to present that evidence. The mission was designed to fail from the beginning, Dr. Reed continued. Delayed air support, sanitized intelligence reports, and tactical parameters that made success impossible. When you made the decision to withdraw rather than sacrifice your entire team, you unknowingly saved yourself from becoming another casualty in their cover-up. Alex stared at the documents spread across the table, feeling 18 months of guilt and shame transforming into rage. She had been destroying herself with guilt over a decision that had actually saved lives, while the real criminals had used her as a scapegoat to hide their own crimes. Who's responsible? Alex asked, her voice carrying the deadly calm that her soldiers had learned to recognize as a warning sign. General Patricia Donovan was the primary architect, Dr. Reed replied. But she had help from Colonel Richard Hawthorne, among others. They needed someone to take the blame for the mission failure, and you were the perfect candidate, a decorated officer whose tactical decision could be painted as cowardice. The mention of Hawthorne's name was like a knife to Alex's heart. He had been her commanding officer, someone she had trusted and respected. The idea that he had participated in her destruction while pretending to support her was almost more than she could bear. "How do you know all this?" Alex asked, struggling to process the scope of the betrayal. "Because I wasn't the only one who suspected the truth," Dr. Reed replied. "There are others, good people, who couldn't stand by and watch while corruption destroyed everything we swore to protect." As if summoned by her words, 2 figures approached their table from different directions. Alex's military training kicked in automatically, and she tensed for potential threat until she recognized the bearing and movement patterns of fellow soldiers. The first was a man in his 40s with the lean build and alert eyes of a Special Forces operator. He sat down next to Dr. Reed without ceremony, extending his hand to Alex. "Staff Sergeant Tyler Brooks," he introduced himself. "Officially killed in action 14 months ago during a training accident. Actually, I discovered that my commanding officer was selling operational plans to insurgent forces." The second arrival was a woman in her 30s with the confident bearing of a combat veteran. She took the remaining chair at their table and studied Alex with obvious curiosity. "Captain Emma Foster," she said by way of introduction. "Officially transferred to a classified assignment 2 years ago. Actually, I was forced underground when I uncovered evidence that weapons intended for friendly Afghan forces were being diverted to Taliban units." Alex looked around the table at 3 people who had sacrificed their official lives to fight corruption within their own system. "How many of you are there?" 7 active members, Dr. Reed replied. "We call ourselves Task Force Guardian. We're all officially dead, transferred, or discharged, which gives us the freedom to operate outside normal channels." "What do you want from me?" Alex asked, though she was beginning to understand her role in their organization. Tyler Brooks answered her question. We want you to help us expose the network that destroyed your career and killed those 4 intelligence specialists. But more than that, we need your help to stop them from doing it again." Emma Foster leaned forward across the table. "They're planning something big. Alex, our intelligence suggests another operation is being set up for failure. Another group of good soldiers being sacrificed to protect the network's activities." The weight of responsibility settled on Alex's shoulders like a familiar burden. For 18 months, she had believed her military career was over, that her only choice was to survive in obscurity and shame. But these people were offering her something she hadn't dared to hope for: the chance to fight back. What kind of operation? Alex asked, her analytical mind already shifting into tactical planning mode. Dr. Reed opened another file and spread out satellite imagery and mission parameters. A mountain warfare training exercise in 3 weeks. 50 of our best soldiers will be conducting high-altitude operations in terrain similar to what you faced during Operation Mountain Storm. Alex studied the materials with growing alarm. The mission parameters showed the same impossible tactical requirements, the same delayed support schedules, and the same intelligence gaps that had doomed Operation Mountain Storm. "They're going to get them all killed," she said quietly, understanding the full scope of what Task Force Guardian was asking her to prevent. "Unless we stop them," Tyler Brooks confirmed. "The question is whether you're ready to risk everything to save soldiers you've never met." Alex thought about the 4 intelligence specialists who had died in Taliban custody, about the 18 months of guilt and shame she had carried, and about the 50 soldiers who were walking into a trap designed by their own command structure. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, making the decision that would either redeem her reputation or get her killed. Dr. Reed smiled for the first time since they had met. "We need you to be the soldier you've always been, Alex. We need you to lead." As Alex looked around the table at her new teammates, she felt something she hadn't experienced since before Operation Mountain Storm, a sense of purpose and belonging. Task Force Guardian wasn't just offering her revenge against the people who had destroyed her career. They were offering her the chance to prevent other soldiers from suffering the same fate. For the first time in 18 months, Captain Alexandra Reeves was ready to fight. 3 days after her recruitment into Task Force Guardian, Alex found herself in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Denver that served as their operational headquarters. The facility looked derelict from the outside, but inside it had been transformed into a sophisticated intelligence center with computers, communication equipment, and enough supplies to support extended operations. "Welcome to our home away from home," Tyler Brooks said as he led Alex through the facility. "We've been operating out of here for 8 months, gathering intelligence on the corruption network and trying to stay ahead of their cleanup operations." Alex surveyed the setup with professional appreciation. The warehouse had been organized with military precision-designated areas for intelligence analysis, communications, weapons storage, and living quarters. It was clear that Task Force Guardian took their mission seriously and had the resources to operate independently of official channels. At the center of the facility stood Major Daniel Pierce, a man Alex recognized from his reputation, even though they had never served together. Pierce had been a legendary intelligence officer before his official death in a helicopter crash 6 months earlier. His presence confirmed that Task Force Guardian was composed of some of the military's most capable operators. "Captain Reeves." Pierce greeted her formally. "Dr. Reed briefed me on your situation. We're glad to have someone with your mountain warfare expertise on the team." "Thank you, sir," Alex replied, falling back into military protocol despite their unofficial status. "What can you tell me about the upcoming operation?" Pierce led her to a large display screen covered with satellite imagery, mission parameters, and organizational charts. "Operation Alpine Thunder is scheduled to commence in 18 days at the Mountain Warfare Training Center in California. 50 soldiers from various elite units will be conducting high-altitude operations designed to test new tactical doctrines. Alex studied the mission materials with growing concern. The tactical parameters were almost identical to Operation Mountain Storm Complex. Objectives in difficult terrain with minimal support and unrealistic timelines. Someone was using the same playbook that had doomed her mission 18 months earlier. Who's commanding the operation? Alex asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Colonel Richard Hawthorne, Pierce replied, confirming her worst fears. He's been promoted since your discharge and is now overseeing all mountain warfare training operations. The revelation that Hawthorne was still in position to destroy more lives filled Alex with cold rage. Not only had he escaped consequences for his role in Operation Mountain Storm, but he had been rewarded with increased responsibility and authority. Emma Foster joined them at the display screen, carrying a tablet loaded with financial records. We've been tracking money flows related to the weapons trafficking network, she explained. The pattern is clear: operations fail, equipment is reported destroyed or captured, and replacement contracts are awarded to companies with connections to the conspirators. Alex studied the financial data with her trained analytical mind. The numbers told a story of systematic fraud on a massive scale. Millions of dollars in military equipment were being diverted through failed operations, with the profits flowing to a network of corrupt officials and defense contractors. How much evidence do we have? Alex asked. Dr. Reed approached with a secure laptop. Enough to prove the conspiracy exists, but not enough to identify all the participants or prevent the next operation. That's where you come in. She opened the laptop to reveal a complex database containing financial records, communication intercepts, and operational reports. We need someone with your operational background to analyze the tactical patterns and predict how they plan to sabotage Operation Alpine Thunder. Alex spent the next several hours immersed in the intelligence materials, applying the analytical skills that had made her an exceptional officer. The conspiracy was more extensive than she had imagined, involving not just military officers, but defense contractors, intelligence officials, and politicians who profited from the systematic failure of American military operations. They're not just stealing equipment, Alex concluded after reviewing the evidence. They're deliberately getting our people killed to maintain the flow of replacement contracts and cover their tracks. Tyler Brooks nodded grimly. Every failed operation eliminates witnesses and generates new procurement opportunities. It's a business model built on American blood. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Alex had spent 15 years believing she was serving her country, only to discover that some of her superiors were treating American soldiers as expendable resources in a criminal enterprise. What's our timeline for stopping Operation Alpine Thunder? Alex asked, shifting into tactical planning mode. Major Pierce consulted his notes. 18 days until the operation begins. But we need to act sooner than that. Once the soldiers are deployed to the training area, it becomes much harder to extract them without official authorization. We need irrefutable evidence, Dr. Reed added, something so compelling that even the corrupt officials can't suppress it or explain it away. Alex studied the mission parameters for Operation Alpine Thunder, looking for weaknesses in the conspiracy's plan. They're using the same tactical template as Operation Mountain Storm, she observed. Impossible objectives, inadequate support, and predetermined failure points. Can you predict how they plan to sabotage the mission? Emma Foster asked. Alex traced the operation timeline with her finger, identifying critical decision points where sabotage could be introduced. Equipment failures during critical phases, delayed or misdirected support assets, and communication breakdowns at key moments. They'll make it look like bad luck or operational friction, but it will be carefully orchestrated. The team worked through the night, developing a plan to gather additional evidence while simultaneously preparing to intervene in Operation Alpine Thunder. Alex found herself energized by the collaborative planning process, using skills that had been dormant since her discharge. "We need someone inside the operation," Alex concluded after hours of analysis. "Someone who can document the sabotage as it happens and provide real-time intelligence about the conspiracy's actions." Tyler Brooks looked up from his communication equipment. "That someone would have to be you, Alex. You're the only one with the operational background and mountain warfare expertise to credibly participate in the exercise." The suggestion sent a chill through the warehouse. Alex returning to active operations meant exposing herself to the same people who had destroyed her career. If they recognized her or suspected her involvement with Task Force Guardian, she would become a priority target for elimination. "How do we get a dishonorably discharged officer into a classified training operation?" Alex asked. Major Pierce smiled for the first time since she had met him. "We don't. We get a civilian mountain warfare consultant into the operation. Someone with extensive experience who's been hired to provide expert advisory services." Dr. Reed opened another file on her laptop. "We've been building false identities for all our members. Alex Martinez, civilian contractor with 15 years of mountain warfare experience. Her background check will show service with a private military company that operates in classified environments." Alex studied her new identity with fascination. The documentation was flawless, complete with employment records, security clearances, and references that would withstand routine investigation. Task Force Guardian had resources and capabilities that rivaled official intelligence agencies. "When do I deploy?" Alex asked, accepting the mission that would either vindicate her or get her killed. "In 1 week," Pierce replied. "That gives U.S. time to finalize your cover story and brief you on the intelligence collection requirements." As the team dispersed to their various tasks, Alex remained at the intelligence display, studying the faces of the 50 soldiers who would participate in Operation Alpine Thunder. They were young, dedicated, and trusting. Everything she had been before Operation Mountain Storm destroyed her faith in the system. In 1 week, she would return to the mountains that had defined her career, this time not as Captain Alexandra Reeves, but as a ghost seeking redemption. The mission would be the most dangerous of her life, but for the first time since her discharge, she had a chance to save lives instead of being blamed for losing them. Task Force Guardian had given her more than evidence of her innocence. They had given her the opportunity to prevent other soldiers from suffering the same betrayal she had endured. As she prepared for the mission that would determine her fate, Alex felt the familiar surge of determination that had carried her through 15 years of military service. This time she wouldn't just survive the mountains. She would use them to expose the truth. 5 days before Alex was scheduled to infiltrate Operation Alpine Thunder, everything changed. At 0347 hours on a Thursday morning, Tyler Brooks burst into the warehouse with news that transformed their mission from evidence gathering to emergency rescue. "We've got a problem," he announced, his usual calm demeanor replaced by obvious urgency. "A massive earthquake hit the Hindu Kush region of Afghanistan 6 hours ago. Magnitude 7.2. Alex looked up from the mission file she had been studying, immediately understanding the implications. The Hindu Kush Mountains were where several American outposts maintained strategic positions along the Pakistani border, monitoring Taliban movement and supporting ongoing operations. Dr. Reed was already pulling up satellite imagery on the main display screen. 3 forward operating bases were hit directly, she reported, her voice tight with concern. "Communication has been lost with all of them. Initial estimates suggest over 200 American personnel are trapped." The warehouse erupted into controlled activity as Task Force Guardian processed the developing crisis. Alex studied the satellite images with growing alarm, recognizing the terrain from her own deployments to the region. The earthquake had triggered massive landslides that had cut off all ground access to the affected bases. "What's the official response?" Alex asked. Though she suspected she already knew the answer, Major Pierce looked up from his communication station with a grim expression. The Pentagon is mobilizing a rescue operation, but they're estimating it will take 72 hours to get teams into position. Weather conditions are deteriorating, and the terrain is considered too dangerous for immediate deployment. Emma Foster was monitoring military communication networks. They're calling it Operation Mountain Rescue, she reported. And guess who's been appointed as operational commander? Alex felt her stomach drop even before Emma answered her own question. General Patricia Donovan, with tactical command delegated to Colonel Richard Hawthorne. The revelation hit the team like a physical blow. The same people who had sabotaged Operation Mountain Storm and were planning to destroy Operation Alpine Thunder were now in charge of rescuing 200 trapped soldiers. It was a scenario so cynical that Alex struggled to process the implications. They're going to let those soldiers die, Tyler Brooks said quietly, voicing what everyone was thinking. 200 casualties will generate massive equipment, replacement contracts, and eliminate any witnesses who might have seen evidence of their weapons trafficking operations. Dr. Reed was analyzing meteorological data. The weather window is closing rapidly. If a rescue operation doesn't begin within the next 18 hours, avalanche conditions will make the area inaccessible for weeks. Alex studied the terrain maps with her expert eye, identifying potential approach routes and evacuation strategies. The earthquake had fundamentally changed the geography of the region, creating new obstacles while eliminating traditional access paths. It would require innovative tactical approaches and deep understanding of mountain warfare to succeed. What about other units? Alex asked. Surely there are mountain warfare specialists who could lead the rescue operation. Major Pierce pulled up personnel files on his laptop. The 10th Mountain Division is deployed in Iraq. The 87th Mountain Infantry Regiment is conducting training operations in Alaska. The Army's best mountain warfare specialists are scattered across 3 continents. Except for one, Emma Foster said quietly, looking directly at Alex. The warehouse fell silent as the implications became clear. Of all the mountain warfare specialists in the American military, Alex had the most experience in the specific terrain where the earthquake had struck. She had conducted operations in that exact region, knew the seasonal weather patterns, and understood the unique challenges of high-altitude rescue in avalanche-prone conditions. They'll never accept help from a dishonorably discharged officer, Alex protested, though her mind was already analyzing potential rescue strategies. They will if they don't know who's really helping them, Dr. Reed replied, opening Alex's false identity files. Alex Martinez, civilian mountain warfare consultant, has exactly the expertise they need. Tyler Brooks was monitoring news coverage of the disaster. The story is already going public. Congressional pressure is building for immediate rescue operations. The Pentagon can't afford to let 200 soldiers die while the world is watching. Alex realized that Task Force Guardian was proposing something unprecedented, using her false identity to infiltrate the official rescue operation and prevent the conspiracy from sabotaging it. It would mean working directly with the people who had destroyed her career while pretending to be someone else entirely. It's too dangerous, Alex said, though her voice lacked conviction. If Hawthorne or Donovan recognize me, I'm dead. You've been out of uniform for 18 months, Emma Foster pointed out. Your appearance has changed, and they'll be expecting to see a civilian contractor, not a disgraced officer. Major Pierce stood up from his workstation. Alex, we're not just talking about exposing the conspiracy anymore. We're talking about saving 200 American lives. Those soldiers don't have 72 hours to wait for an official rescue that may never come. The weight of responsibility settled on Alex's shoulders like an avalanche. 200 soldiers were trapped in one of the world's most dangerous mountain ranges, under the command of people who had no intention of mounting an effective rescue. She was possibly the only person with the expertise and motivation to save them. Dr. Reed opened a secure communication channel. I still have contacts inside the Pentagon. I can get Alex Martinez added to the emergency consultant roster within 6 hours. Her mountain warfare credentials will make her invaluable to the rescue planning team. What about Operation Alpine Thunder? Alex asked, remembering their original mission. That gets postponed indefinitely, Tyler Brooks replied. The earthquake just gave us a bigger problem to solve. Alex studied the satellite imagery one more time, calculating approach routes, evacuation timelines, and resource requirements. It would be the most challenging rescue operation of her career, conducted under conditions that made Operation Mountain Storm look simple by comparison. How do I get to Afghanistan without raising suspicions? Alex asked, making the decision. That would either redeem her completely or destroy any chance she had of survival. Military transport leaves from Peterson Air Force Base in 8 hours, Pierce replied. Alex Martinez will be on that plane as part of the emergency response team. Emma Foster was already preparing equipment and documentation. Your cover identity includes specialized mountain rescue gear and communication equipment. Everything you need to conduct the operation while gathering evidence of any sabotage attempts. As Task Force Guardian prepared for the most important mission of their existence, Alex felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded dangerous operations. In 8 hours, she would be returning to active duty for the first time since her discharge, not as Captain Alexandra Reeves, but as a civilian contractor with the skills to save 200 lives. There's one more thing, Dr. Reed said as Alex prepared to leave for the airbase. Our intelligence suggests that someone in the Pentagon leaked the locations of those forward operating bases to Taliban forces before the earthquake. This disaster might not be as natural as it appears. The revelation added another layer of complexity to an already impossible mission. If the earthquake had been preceded by intelligence leaks, then the trapped soldiers weren't just victims of natural disaster, they were targets of the same conspiracy that had destroyed Operation Mountain Storm. Alex shouldered her equipment bag and headed toward the warehouse exit. Then we'd better make sure they survive long enough to tell that story. As she drove toward Peterson Air Force Base, Alex realized that she was about to face the ultimate test of everything she had learned during 15 years of military service. The mountains of Afghanistan would either vindicate her tactical abilities or claim her life in the attempt to save others. For the first time since Operation Mountain Storm, Captain Alexandra Reeves was going back to war. The military transport touched down at Bagram Airfield 18 hours after Alex had left Denver, carrying her back to Afghanistan for the first time since Operation Mountain Storm had destroyed her career. As she stepped off the aircraft, the familiar combination of dust, diesel fuel, and mountain air triggered memories she had spent 18 months trying to suppress. Alex Martinez, civilian contractor, moved through the controlled chaos of Bagram with the confident stride of someone who belonged in this environment. Her false documentation had passed every security checkpoint, and her specialized mountain rescue equipment marked her as exactly what the rescue operation desperately needed: an expert who could navigate terrain that had already claimed several reconnaissance aircraft. The forward command post for Operation Mountain Rescue had been established in a heavily fortified compound near the airfield's operations center. Alex approached the security checkpoint with carefully controlled anticipation, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether her cover identity could survive close scrutiny by the people who had destroyed her career. Alex Martinez, mountain warfare consultant, she announced to the sergeant manning the checkpoint, handing over her credentials with the casual confidence of someone who had nothing to hide. The sergeant processed her documentation efficiently, comparing her photograph to his roster of authorized personnel. Yes, ma'am. Colonel Hawthorne is expecting you in the operations center, Building 7, second floor. Alex felt her pulse quicken at the mention of Hawthorne's name. but she maintained her professional demeanor as she made her way across the compound. In a few minutes, she would be face to face with the man who had presided over her court-martial and watched her career die without lifting a finger to help her. The operations center buzzed with the controlled urgency of a major rescue effort. Wall-mounted displays showed satellite imagery of the earthquake zone, weather forecasts that grew more ominous by the hour, and organizational charts tracking personnel and equipment. At the center of it all stood Colonel Richard Hawthorne, older and grayer than Alex remembered, but carrying the same air of authority that had once inspired her loyalty. "Ms. Martinez?" Hawthorne looked up from a tactical map as Alex approached. "Thank you for getting here so quickly. We need every expert we can get." Alex studied his face carefully, looking for any sign of recognition. But Hawthorne's expression showed only professional interest in a consultant who might help solve his operational challenges. 18 months of civilian life had changed her appearance enough that he saw only what he expected to see: a contractor with valuable expertise. "Colonel," Alex replied, maintaining the slightly casual tone that civilian contractors used with military officers. "I understand you have personnel trapped in earthquake-affected terrain. What's the current tactical situation?" Hawthorne led her to a large display screen showing the disaster area. 3 forward operating bases were hit by the earthquake and subsequent landslides: FOB Granite, FOB Summit, and FOB Avalanche. Approximately 200 personnel total, with intermittent radio contact suggesting significant casualties. Alex studied the imagery with professional interest, noting details that others might miss. The earthquake had fundamentally altered the terrain, creating new valleys while filling others with debris. Traditional approach routes had been eliminated, and new hazards made the area extremely dangerous for conventional rescue operations. "What assets do you have available?" Alex asked, falling into the analytical mode that had made her an exceptional officer. 2 helicopter squadrons, a company of mountain-qualified infantry, and whatever specialized equipment we can airlift from the States, Hawthorne replied. "But weather conditions are deteriorating rapidly. We have maybe 36 hours before the area becomes completely inaccessible." Alex calculated timelines and resource requirements with the speed that came from years of operational planning. The official estimate of 72 hours for rescue deployment had been overly optimistic. Conditions on the ground were worse than anyone in Washington understood. "Colonel, with respect, conventional approaches aren't going to work in this terrain," Alex said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had survived similar conditions. "The earthquake created new avalanche zones and eliminated most helicopter landing sites. You need small teams with specialized equipment, not large formations with heavy support." General Patricia Donovan entered the operations center as Alex finished her assessment. Alex felt every muscle in her body tense as she recognized the woman who had presided over her destruction. But Donovan's attention was focused entirely on the tactical situation. "Colonel Hawthorne, what's our deployment timeline?" Donovan demanded, her voice carrying the impatience of someone under enormous political pressure. "Ms. Martinez was just explaining why conventional approaches won't work," Hawthorne replied, gesturing toward Alex. "Ms. Martinez, this is General Donovan, overall commander for the rescue operation." Alex maintained her professional composure as she shook hands with the woman who had destroyed her life. "General, the terrain analysis shows that large-scale operations will fail due to avalanche risk and lack of suitable landing zones. We need to completely redesign the rescue approach." Donovan studied Alex with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating personnel under pressure. "What do you recommend?" Alex moved to the tactical display and began outlining an alternative strategy. Small teams inserted at high altitude, using specialized climbing techniques to reach the trapped personnel. Evacuation by stages through intermediate rally points, with medical stabilization conducted in the field. "How long would such an operation take?" Donovan asked, her tone suggesting she had already decided the answer wouldn't meet her requirements. Properly planned and executed, we could begin extracting personnel within 12 hours, Alex replied. But it requires teams with extensive high-altitude experience and equipment that isn't currently available in theater. Hawthorne looked skeptical. Ms. Martinez, our mountain warfare specialists are deployed elsewhere. We don't have personnel with the qualifications you're describing. Alex felt the moment of truth approaching. Colonel, I have 15 years of experience in this exact type of terrain. I can lead the initial assessment team and establish evacuation routes for the main rescue effort. The operations center fell silent as the implications of her offer became clear. A civilian contractor was proposing to lead the most dangerous phase of a military rescue operation in some of the world's most treacherous terrain. Absolutely not, General Donovan said firmly. We don't send civilians into active combat zones, regardless of their qualifications. General, with respect, this isn't a combat zone, it's a natural disaster site, Alex replied, pressing the only advantage she had. And those soldiers don't have time for conventional solutions that won't work anyway. Colonel Hawthorne studied the tactical situation with obvious frustration. The official timeline for rescue deployment was clearly inadequate, but military. Regulations prohibited the use of civilian contractors in operational roles. A communications technician interrupted their discussion. Sir, we're receiving an emergency transmission from Fort Meridian. They're reporting structural collapse and requesting immediate medical evacuation for critically injured personnel. The urgency of the situation crystallized the impossible choice. Facing the military commanders, they could follow regulations and watch 200 soldiers die, or they could bend the rules and accept help from someone with the expertise to save lives. Ms. Martinez, General Donovan said after a long pause, if we were to authorize your participation in the initial assessment, what would you need? Alex felt a surge of adrenaline as she realized they were actually considering her proposal. A small team of experienced climbers, specialized equipment for high-altitude operations, and complete tactical authority during the assessment phase. Hawthorne and Donovan exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their predicament. Political pressure demanded immediate action, but operational reality made conventional approaches impossible. You understand that this would be entirely unofficial, Donovan said finally. If something goes wrong, the Pentagon will deny any knowledge of your involvement. Alex almost smiled at the irony. The same people who had destroyed her career for making a tactical decision were now asking her to make an even more dangerous choice with even less official support. I understand completely, General, Alex replied. But those soldiers are running out of time, and I'm the only person here with the experience to reach them. As the command team began planning an operation that would either save 200 lives or add one more casualty to the conspiracy's body count, Alex realized she had achieved something she never thought possible. She was back in uniform, even if no one else knew it. 6 hours later, Alex found herself rappelling down a sheer cliff face in the Hindu Kush Mountains, leading a team of 4 volunteer special operations soldiers toward Fort Meridian. The earthquake had transformed the familiar terrain into an alien landscape of fractured rock and unstable snow formations that could collapse without warning. Movement ahead, reported Sergeant Martinez through the team's communication system. Looks like we've got Taliban forces positioning themselves around the base perimeter. Alex cursed silently as she confirmed the sighting through her binoculars. The presence of enemy forces wasn't part of the natural disaster scenario. It suggested that someone had provided intelligence about the trapped American positions to hostile forces. How did they get here so fast? Asked Corporal Johnson, the team's medic. Alex keyed her radio to contact the operations center. Command Rescue 1. We have eyes on approximately 30 Taliban fighters establishing positions around Fort Meridian. Request immediate explanation of enemy presence in earthquake zone. The response took longer than it should have, and when it came, Colonel Hawthorne's voice carried an edge of tension that confirmed Alex's suspicions. Rescue 1, that's unexpected. Intelligence reports indicated the area was clear of hostile forces. Through her encrypted communication device provided by Task Force Guardian, Alex heard Dr. Reed's voice in her earpiece. Alex, we're monitoring the official communications. Someone just sent new grid coordinates to Taliban units in the area. The sabotage is happening in real time. Alex felt the familiar chill of betrayal as she realized the conspiracy was actively working to ensure the rescue mission failed. The trapped soldiers weren't just victims of a natural disaster, they were being deliberately sacrificed to enemy forces while the world watched. Command, the enemy positions are preventing access to the trapped personnel, Alex reported. Request immediate air support to suppress hostile forces. Another long pause before Hawthorne responded. Rescue 1, weather conditions are preventing air operations in your area. You'll need to find an alternate approach. Alex checked her weather monitoring equipment and found clear skies with minimal wind-perfect conditions for air support. Someone was lying about the weather to prevent the rescue from succeeding. Sergeant Martinez, Alex called to her team leader. We're going to assume that official support isn't coming. We extract those soldiers ourselves or they die. The team moved through the treacherous terrain with the silent efficiency of elite soldiers, avoiding Taliban positions while searching for a route into the collapsed base. Alex's knowledge of mountain warfare proved invaluable as she identified approach routes that wouldn't trigger avalanches or expose them to enemy fire. Inside Phobe Granite, they found a scene of devastation that exceeded their worst expectations. The earthquake had collapsed most of the structures, trapping dozens of soldiers under tons of debris. The survivors were attempting to dig out their comrades while dealing with serious injuries and dwindling supplies. Thank God you're here, said Captain Williams, the senior surviving officer. We've lost radio contact with command and have 27 soldiers trapped in the collapsed buildings. Alex quickly assessed the rescue requirements. They needed heavy equipment to move the debris, medical supplies for the injured, and evacuation. Support for personnel who couldn't climb out under their own power. All of this had to be accomplished while avoiding Taliban forces that were systematically surrounding the base. Captain, we're going to get you out of here, Alex promised. Though she wasn't sure how she was going to keep that promise without official support. As her team began organizing the rescue effort, Alex's communication device crackled with an emergency transmission from Tyler Brooks. Alex, we've intercepted communications between General Donovan and an unknown party. She's actively coordinating with someone to ensure the rescue mission fails. They're planning to declare all personnel lost and blame the failure on impossible conditions. The revelation confirmed Alex's worst fears. The earthquake hadn't just created an opportunity for the conspiracy to eliminate witnesses, it had been used as cover for a mass murder designed to protect their criminal activities. Can you get evidence? Alex asked through her encrypted channel. We're recording everything, Tyler replied. But you need to get those soldiers out alive to testify about what really happened. Alex keyed her official radio to contact the operations center. Command Rescue 1, I need immediate clarification on support availability. We have survivable casualties that require evacuation, but hostile forces are preventing extraction. General. Donovan's voice came through the radio with barely concealed satisfaction. Rescue 1, conditions on the ground are too dangerous for evacuation operations. Fall back to a safe distance and await further orders. General, we have 27 soldiers trapped in collapsed structures. They won't survive if we abandon them. Ms. Martinez, you are exceeding your authority as a civilian consultant. Withdraw immediately. Alex looked around at the trapped soldiers and the survivors who were desperately trying to save their comrades. These were the same type of dedicated soldiers she had served with for 15 years, people who deserved better than being sacrificed to protect a criminal conspiracy. Negative command, we're continuing rescue operations. The radio erupted with angry voices as Alex officially defied orders from the rescue operation commander. But she had learned something important during Operation Mountain Storm sometimes. The right decision was the one that got you court-martialed. All stations, this is General Donovan. Ms. Martinez is no longer authorized to participate in rescue operations. Any personnel assisting her will face disciplinary action. Alex looked at Sergeant Martinez and the other soldiers on her team, giving them the opportunity to withdraw and avoid the consequences of following her lead. "Ma'am," Sergeant Martinez said simply, "these are our people. We're not leaving." For the next 8 hours, Alex led an unauthorized rescue operation that would either save 200 lives or result in court-martial for everyone involved. Using techniques learned during 15 years of mountain warfare, her team systematically extracted trapped soldiers while avoiding Taliban forces that had been mysteriously informed of their exact positions. The breakthrough came when Dr. Reed contacted her with critical intelligence. "Alex, we've cracked their communication codes. The Taliban positions were provided by someone in the Pentagon who's been feeding them targeting information throughout the operation. Can you prove it?" Alex asked while directing the extraction of another injured soldier. "We have recordings of the conversations and evidence of the intelligence transfers. But more importantly, we know their next move. They're planning to call in an airstrike on your position to eliminate all witnesses." Alex felt her blood turn to ice. The conspiracy wasn't just willing to let the soldiers die. They were planning to actively kill them to protect their secrets. "How long do we have?" 30 minutes before the strike aircraft reach your position." Alex keyed her radio for a final transmission to the operations center. "Command Rescue 1. We have extracted 68 survivors from Fob Granite and identified the remains of all missing personnel. We're ready for evacuation support." General Donovan's response was cold and final. "Rescue 1, no evacuation support is available. Maintain your position and await further orders." Alex smiled grimly as she realized that General Donovan had just provided the final piece of evidence that Task Force Guardian needed. By refusing to evacuate survivors and ordering them to remain in position before an airstrike, she had confirmed her intention to eliminate witnesses. "Dr. Reed," Alex said through her encrypted channel, "did you get that transmission?" "Every word, Alex, and it's being broadcast live to every major news network in the world." As Alex led 68 survivors toward an extraction point that didn't officially exist, she realized that the truth about Operation Mountain Storm, Operation Alpine Thunder, and the entire conspiracy was finally coming to light. The mountains of Afghanistan had witnessed her disgrace 18 months earlier, and now they were witnessing her vindication. The unauthorized extraction took place under the cover of darkness, with helicopters piloted by crews who had volunteered for a mission that officially didn't exist. As Alex helped load the last of the rescued soldiers onto the aircraft, she could hear the distant thunder of the airstrike that had been intended to eliminate all witnesses to the conspiracy's crimes. "Rescue 1, this is Eagle Flight," called the helicopter pilot. "We've got all personnel secured. Time to get out of here." Alex took one last look at the mountains that had defined so much of her life, the peaks where she had learned to be a soldier, where her career had been destroyed, and where she had finally found redemption. Then she climbed aboard the helicopter and flew toward a future she couldn't have imagined 18 months earlier. The flight to Bagram Airfield passed in tense silence as everyone aboard understood the magnitude of what had just occurred. 68 American soldiers were alive because a dishonorably discharged officer had defied orders and led an unauthorized rescue operation. But more importantly, the evidence gathered during the mission would expose a conspiracy that had cost countless American lives. When the helicopters landed at Bagram, Alex was surprised to find the entire base in controlled chaos. News crews, congressional investigators, and military police were swarming the compound, while senior officers tried to manage a crisis that was spiraling beyond their control. "Miss Martinez," called a familiar voice as Alex stepped off the helicopter. She turned to see Agent Jessica Murphy, the FBI contact that Task Force Guardian had mentioned during their briefings. "Agent Murphy," Alex replied carefully, not sure whether the FBI presence was good news or bad news for her situation. "We need to talk," Murphy said, gesturing toward a secure facility away from the media circus. "There are some things you need to know about what's been happening while you were in the mountains." Inside the secure briefing room, Alex found herself face to face with Senator William Grant, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and General Michael Harrison, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The presence of such high-ranking officials suggested that the conspiracy's exposure had reached the highest levels of government. "Ms. Martinez," Senator Grant began, or should I say, Captain Alexandra Reeves? Alex felt a moment of panic before she realized that the senator's tone carried respect rather than accusation. Her cover identity had been blown, but apparently not by hostile forces. "Senator, I can explain," Alex started, but Grant held up his hand to stop her. "Captain, there's nothing to explain. For the past 6 hours, we've been reviewing evidence provided by Task Force Guardian that proves you were framed during Operation Mountain Storm. We know who you really are, and we know what you've sacrificed to expose this conspiracy." "General." Harrison opened a secure laptop and showed Alex recordings of conversations between General Donovan and Taliban intelligence operatives. The evidence was devastating, clear proof that American military officers had been selling operational intelligence to enemy forces for over 3 years. "The scope of the betrayal is staggering," Harrison explained. Operation Mountain Storm was deliberately sabotaged to eliminate soldiers who had discovered the weapons trafficking network. Your tactical decision to withdraw saved 12 lives and prevented the conspiracy from claiming even more victims. Agent Murphy added additional context. "Our investigation shows that General Donovan and Colonel Hawthorne have been at the center of a network that has compromised dozens of operations, resulting in over 100 American casualties. The evidence you helped gather during today's rescue operation provides the final proof we needed to arrest the entire network." Alex sat in stunned silence as the officials outlined the full extent of the conspiracy she had helped expose. The accusations of cowardice that had destroyed her career were not just wrong. They had been deliberately fabricated to protect criminals who were selling American lives for profit. "What happens now?" Alex asked, still struggling to process the magnitude of her vindication. Senator Grant smiled for the first time since she had met him. "Captain Reeves, you are hereby restored to full active duty, with all charges against you dismissed and expunged from your record. The dishonorable discharge that destroyed your life was based on fabricated evidence and has been ruled invalid." The words hit Alex with more impact than she had expected. For 18 months, she had carried the weight of disgrace and the belief that her military career was permanently destroyed. To hear that she was not only vindicated but restored to active duty felt like waking up from a nightmare that had lasted far too long. "Furthermore," General Harrison continued, "you are being promoted to the rank of Major and awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for your actions during Operation Mountain Storm and today's rescue operation. Your tactical decisions saved the lives of 80 American soldiers, and your courage in exposing this conspiracy has prevented countless future casualties." Alex felt tears threatening to overwhelm her composure as she processed the reality of her complete vindication. Not only had her reputation been restored, but she was being recognized as a hero for the same decisions that had once branded her a coward. "There's more," Agent Murphy said, consulting her notes. "General Donovan and Colonel Hawthorne have been arrested along with 14 other conspirators. The evidence gathered by Task Force Guardian has led to the largest military corruption investigation in modern history. What about Task Force Guardian? Alex asked, concerned about the fate of the people who had risked everything to help her. Senator. Grant's expression grew serious. All members of Task Force Guardian are being restored to their previous positions with full honors. Their sacrifices in exposing this conspiracy exemplify the highest traditions of military service. As the briefing concluded, Alex found herself overwhelmed by the magnitude of the transformation in her life. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from being a dishonorably discharged pariah to being a decorated hero with a restored career and a bright future. Outside the briefing room, she was approached by Captain Williams, the officer she had rescued from FOB Granite. His arm was in a sling, but he was smiling broadly as he extended his good hand to her. "Major Reeves," he said formally, "I wanted to thank you personally for saving my soldiers. When command ordered us to abandon the rescue, I thought we were all going to die in that collapsed bunker." Alex shook his hand, feeling the weight of what they had all accomplished together. "Captain, those soldiers saved themselves through their courage and determination. I just helped them find a way out." As news of the rescue operation and conspiracy exposure spread throughout the base, Alex found herself surrounded by soldiers who wanted to thank her personally. Many of them had served under corrupt officers or had lost friends in operations that had been deliberately sabotaged. Her vindication represented hope that the system could still work when good people refused to give up. That evening, Alex stood on the balcony of her temporary quarters at Bagram, looking out at the same mountains where her career had been destroyed and then reborn. The peaks that had once represented failure and betrayal now symbolized redemption and the triumph of truth. Over corruption, her phone rang with a call from her parents, who had seen the news coverage of her vindication. "Mia," her mother said through tears of joy, "we always knew you weren't a coward. We always believed in you." For the first time in 18 months, Alex felt truly at peace. The mountains had tested her, broken her, and ultimately redeemed her. She had learned that sometimes the right decision was the one that destroyed your career, and sometimes destroying your career was the only way to save your soul. Major Alexandra Reeves was ready for whatever came next. 6 months after her vindication, Major Alexandra Reeves stood in the Pentagon briefing room where her new assignment would be revealed. The same building where corrupt officials had once plotted her destruction now housed the office where she would lead efforts to prevent similar betrayals from ever happening again. "Major Reeves," announced General Michael Harrison, "you are hereby appointed as the director of the newly established Military Integrity Task Force. Your mission will be to investigate corruption within military command structures and ensure that no American soldier ever again faces betrayal from their own leadership." Alex accepted the assignment with the same sense of purpose that had driven her throughout her career. The position represented more than just professional advancement. It was an opportunity to transform the pain of her experience into protection for future generations of soldiers. The Military Integrity Task Force was headquartered in a secure facility outside Washington, D.C., where Alex found herself reunited with the members of Task Force Guardian who had risked everything to expose the truth. Dr. Samantha Reed had been appointed as Chief Intelligence Analyst, while Tyler Brooks, Emma Foster, and Major Daniel Pierce had all been given senior positions within the organization. "Welcome to our new home," Dr. Reed said as she showed Alex around the state-of-the-art facility. "We have everything we need to monitor corruption, investigate suspicious activities, and protect whistleblowers who come forward with evidence of wrongdoing." The task force's first major investigation involved reviewing every military operation from the past 5 years, looking for patterns that might indicate additional cases of deliberate sabotage or intelligence leaks. The work was painstaking and often heartbreaking, as they uncovered evidence of numerous operations that had been compromised by corrupt officials. We've identified at least 37 operations that show signs of deliberate sabotage, reported Tyler Brooks during their weekly briefing. The scope of the betrayal goes far beyond what we originally discovered. Each compromised operation represented American lives lost to the greed and treachery of people who had sworn to protect them. Alex felt the weight of responsibility as she realized how many soldiers might have been saved if the corruption had been exposed earlier. But the task force's work wasn't just about investigating past crimes, it was about preventing future ones. They developed new protocols for financial monitoring of personnel with access to classified information, created secure channels for reporting suspected corruption, and established rapid response teams that could investigate allegations without going through potentially compromised command structures. The key is creating a system where corruption can't take root, Alex explained during a congressional hearing on military reform. We need multiple layers of oversight, independent investigation capabilities, and absolute protection for soldiers who have the courage to report wrongdoing. The impact of their work extended far beyond the military. The exposure of the weapons trafficking conspiracy had led to congressional investigations, defense contractor reforms, and new laws designed to prevent the systematic betrayal of American interests. Alex found herself testifying before multiple committees, sharing her experience to help lawmakers understand how corruption could flourish even in the most trusted institutions. During one particularly significant hearing, Alex was asked about the personal cost of her journey from disgrace to vindication. "Senator, the 18 months I spent in disgrace were the most difficult period of my life," she testified honestly. "But they also taught me something important about the difference between following orders and doing what's right. Sometimes the system fails, and when it does, individual soldiers have to be willing to stand up for the principles they swore to defend." Her words resonated not just with military personnel, but with people throughout the country who faced their own struggles with institutional corruption and moral compromise. Alex received thousands of letters from citizens who had found inspiration in her story of perseverance and ultimate vindication. One letter particularly moved her, from a young woman who had been considering leaving the military after witnessing corruption in her unit. "Major Reeves," the letter read, "your story showed me that it's possible to fight back against corruption and win. Because of your example, I'm staying in the Army and working to make it better from the inside. Thank you for proving that good. People can still make a difference." As Alex reflected on her journey from Fort Meridian to the Pentagon, she realized that her disgrace had ultimately led to something more meaningful than the successful career she had originally planned. The pain of being wrongly accused had given her the motivation to ensure that other soldiers wouldn't face the same betrayal. The mountains of Afghanistan had tested her in ways she never could have imagined, breaking her down completely before building her up stronger than she had ever been. Operation Mountain Storm had ended her first military career, but it had also begun her second one, a career dedicated to protecting the integrity of the institution she loved. During a recent visit to Fort Meridian, Alex had walked past the memorial wall where her name was still engraved among the distinguished service members. But now there was a new addition, a plaque commemorating the soldiers who had exposed the weapons trafficking conspiracy and saved countless American lives through their courage and sacrifice. "The heroes of Operation Mountain Storm," read the inscription, "who proved that honor and integrity will always triumph over corruption and betrayal." Alex's phone buzzed with a message from Tyler Brooks. "New case just came in. Suspected corruption in defense procurement contracts. Looks like we have work to do." She smiled as she read the message, feeling the familiar surge of purpose that came with a new mission. The Military Integrity Task Force had already prevented 2 major corruption schemes and exposed dozens of smaller ones. Each investigation made the military stronger and safer for the soldiers who served with the same dedication Alex had shown throughout her career. As she prepared to leave for another assignment, that would take her back to dangerous places and difficult decisions. Alex thought about the young soldiers who were just beginning their military careers. They would serve in a system that was more honest and more accountable because of the sacrifices made by Task Force Guardian and the courage shown by soldiers willing to stand up for what was right. The mountains of Colorado were visible through her office window, reminding her of the morning runs at Fort Meridian that had started each day of her first military career. Those peaks no longer represented failure and betrayal. They represented the enduring strength that came from surviving the worst that life could offer and emerging stronger on the other side. Major Alexandra Reeves had found her purpose not despite her disgrace, but because of it. She had been dishonorably discharged for alleged cowardice, only to return as the military's greatest hope for preventing future betrayals. The system had tried to break her, but instead she had fixed the system. And that made all the pain and struggle worthwhile. The mountains were calling again, and Alex was ready to answer. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.